Everyone thinks serial killers were invented in the 1970s. Bundy, profilers, true crime podcasts. No, America had serial killers before it had electric lights. A man built a hotel with rooms designed for murder. A family ran a prairie inn where guests sat with their backs to a curtain. A cheerful nurse kept a private count her whole career. Most of them were never caught the way you'd hope, and one of them probably got away completely. Here are the killers your history class skipped. In 1893, while Chicago threw the greatest fair on earth, a young pharmacist named H. Holmes was running a hotel a few miles south. He designed the building himself, and he kept firing the builders, so that no one but him ever saw the full floor plan. Later, police walked through it and found out why. Soundproofed rooms, doors that locked from the outside, stairways to nowhere, and a chute that ran from the guest floors straight down to the basement. Holmes was charming, handsome, and broke in a very specific way. He ran on insurance fraud. Employees had to take out life insurance policies naming him as the beneficiary. Then they stopped showing up to work. Guests checked in for the World's Fair and never checked out. Nobody connected anything, because Holmes was the nicest man anyone had ever met, and because in 1893, nobody had a word for what he was. It unraveled over an insurance scam gone wrong. Holmes killed his business partner Benjamin Peitzel for the payout, and a former cellmate tipped off the police. He confessed to 27 murders, though some of the people he confessed to killing turned out to be alive, and the courts proved 9. He was hanged in 1896. His last request, bury me in concrete, 10 feet down, so nobody digs me up. The man who spent years dissecting other people was terrified of ending up on a table himself. In the 1870s, on the empty Kansas prairie, a family called the Benders ran a tiny inn on the trail west. One room split down the middle by a canvas curtain. Travelers got a hot meal and the seat of honor with their back to the curtain. Kate Bender, the daughter, was the star attraction, a self-proclaimed healer and spirit medium who advertised in the papers. People went out of their way to stop there. A lot of them were never seen again. The routine was simple and it worked for 2 years. A traveler with money sat down to dinner. A hammer came through the curtain. The body went through a trapdoor into the cellar and was buried at night in the garden, which neighbors later remembered was always freshly plowed. The Benders picked victims who were traveling alone, far from home. On the frontier, people going missing was just Tuesday. In 1873, a traveler named Dr. William York went missing, and his brother, a colonel, came looking with 50 men. The Benders quietly packed a wagon and disappeared. When neighbors searched the property, they found the cellar, and then they started digging up the garden. 11 bodies, the biggest manhunt in Kansas history, found nothing. Detectives chased leads for 50 years. The bloody Benders were never caught, never identified, never found. They are still missing. America's first documented serial killers worked the frontier in 1798, when George Washington was still alive. The Harpe brothers, Big Harpe and Little Harpe, moved down the wilderness road through Kentucky and Tennessee, and they killed the way other people traveled. Constantly, casually, in every settlement they passed. Robbery was the excuse, but they left the money half the time. Even the river pirates they fell in with threw them out. Too violent for pirates. The count is somewhere around 39 people, and the details are the kind history books quietly leave out, including an infant, Big Harpe's own daughter, killed for crying. That was the one even he called a regret. Frontier Kentucky in the 1790s had no police, no telegraph, no way to warn the next town. The Harpes were something the country had no name for yet, moving through a world with no system to stop them. In 1799, a posse finally ran Big Harpe down after he killed the wife and child of a man named Moses Stegall. Stegall rode with the posse, and when it was over, Big Harpe's head was set at a crossroads in Kentucky as a warning. Here's the part that gets me: the warning stuck. That crossroads sits on a road that is still officially named Harpe's Head Road today. People drive it every morning. Little Harpe escaped, joined another gang, and was hanged 5 years later. In the early 1900s, a widow named Belle Gunness ran a farm in LaPorte, Indiana, and placed Lonely Hearts ads in the Norwegian language papers. Comely widow, fine farm, seeks good man. Triflers need not apply. One detail set her ads apart: bring your savings with you in cash. Suitor after suitor arrived at the farm with his life's money. Their families got 1 or 2 letters: she is wonderful, the farm is beautiful, and then nothing, ever again. Belle was a big, capable farm woman who did her own butchering, and neighbors noticed the hog pen ground was always turned over. Her helper, a farmhand named Ray Lamfer, was in love with her and did whatever she asked. Husbands had died before insurance money each time. In April 1908, right after a missing suitor's brother started asking questions by mail, the farmhouse burned to the ground in the night. In the ashes, they found her 3 children and a woman's body, headless, and the doctor said several inches too short to be Belle. Then the missing man's brother arrived and made them dig up the hog pen. They found at least 11 people. The farmhand was convicted only of arson and swore she had staged the whole thing and walked away rich. Sightings of Belle Gunness came in for 20 years. In 2008, they exhumed the headless body to test the DNA. The result was inconclusive. Nobody knows where Belle Gunness is buried or if she ever was. In 1890s Boston, if your family could afford a private nurse, you asked for Jane Toppan. Jolly Jane, warm, funny, tireless, the nurse patients loved. Hospitals trained her, doctors praised her. Families requested her by name for their dying relatives, and their relatives died, which is what dying relatives do, so nobody counted. Jane counted. Jane had been counting for 10 years. Toppan used morphine and atropine. One slows you down, the other speeds you up. And she adjusted the doses to bring patients to the edge and back, over and over, because she liked being the one who decided. In 1901, she killed 4 members of a single family, the Davises, in a matter of weeks. That was the mistake. Whole families don't die of natural causes in one summer, and this time, somebody ordered an autopsy. Jane Toppan confessed to 31 murders and told her lawyer her actual ambition: to have killed more helpless people than any man or woman who ever lived. The court declared her insane in 1902 and sent her to an asylum, where she lived comfortably for another 36 years, occasionally teasing the nurses. "Get me my morphine, dearie, and I'll explain how it's done." The most trusted nurse in Boston died in 1938, having outlived nearly everyone who remembered her patients. In Windsor, Connecticut, around 1910, a respectable widow named Amy Archer-Gilligan ran a private care home for the elderly with a very modern business model. Pay $1,000 up front, and we will care for you for the rest of your life. It sounds generous until you do the math and realize the business only works if the rest of your life is short. At the Archer home, it reliably was. Residents averaged about 3 months. Between 1907 and 1917, 60 people died in that little house. The certificate said old age, said stomach trouble, said heart failure, signed by the family doctor, who never looked hard at why the healthy ones went as fast as the sick ones. Amy bought arsenic by the pound at the local drugstore. For the rats, she said. Her second husband also died of stomach trouble 3 months after updating his will, and his life insurance paid within the week. A local newspaper, tipped off by a dead man's family, ran the story in 1916, the house where they die. Bodies were exhumed, loaded with arsenic. Amy was tried, convicted, and sent to an asylum, where she lived quietly until 1962. If the shape of this story feels familiar, it's because Broadway borrowed it, the play Arsenic and Old Lace. The sweet old ladies poisoning lonely old men out of kindness was inspired by the Archer home. Audiences laughed for 1,400 performances. The real residents got a headline and a reburial. Before any of them, before Holmes had a hotel, before Belle placed an ad, there was Lydia Sherman, whom the newspapers would crown the Queen Poisoner. In the 1860s in New York, married to a policeman fallen on hard times, she solved her problems with a 10-cent packet of rat poison. It worked so well that over the next decade, she solved 3 husbands and 8 children. And nobody, at any point, stopped to ask why everyone around Lydia kept dying of the same stomach complaint. The pattern was always the same. A husband who had become a burden, a household she wanted to leave, arsenic in the tea, a doctor writing stomach inflammation on the certificate. She moved from New York to Connecticut, remarried, and the new household sickened on schedule. Arsenic poisoning looked like half the natural deaths of the 19th century, and death certificates were signed by whoever was nearest. She wasn't hiding from the system. There was no system. Her last husband, Horatio Sherman, died in 1871 after his doctor had already grown suspicious. The autopsy found arsenic everywhere. Her trial in 1872 was the media circus of its day. Papers called her the American Borgia and printed every detail over breakfast. Convicted of murder, she confessed to 11 poisonings, escaped prison once, was recaptured in a hotel, and died behind bars in 1878. The Queen Poisoner's real legacy. States finally started requiring you to sign a register to buy arsenic. Here's the thread running through all 7. None of them were caught by brilliant detective work. Holmes was caught over insurance money. The Benders were never caught at all. Lydia Sherman killed for 10 years because death certificates were an honor system. These killers didn't beat the system. There was no system. No fingerprints, no databases, no word for what they were. Which leaves one uncomfortable question. How many others were there in the same years who were simply never noticed? If this kind of history is your thing, follow along. There's a whole lot more the history books left out.